Well, Brother Lonnie was talking about, some of the things going on in the world, how that it's coming closer to home. And, we do, honestly, you watch the news sometimes and you think, is this stuff really happening? Are these things really going on that we see on the news that's happening in these big cities and, in D.C. and Chicago and all these other places? Because we're kind of in a bubble, honestly. Here in West, what's that, brother?
I believe God's been merciful to us.
I do too. But that bubble's starting to burst a little bit. And, things that we thought that we would never see. And you can't get, just like Brother Lonnie said, you can't get people to believe what's taking place. I mean, we're in a time, and I listen to probably, I don't know, conservatively speaking, probably 3 to 4 hours of news a day. And the reason I do, I feel responsible. I could stick my head in the sand and just preach and not really know what's going on. But when you read about, especially in the Old Testament, about the watchman was responsible for the city. And we all should be watchmen of our own families. We should know what's going on. You may not watch the same things I do or listen to the same things I do. Been listening to a great book, and it was recommended by John. If you've ever listened to John MacArthur, he's on TV and radio and different things. I've read a bunch of his books, but it was recommended. He said, I don't normally read or listen to anything other than things that are related to the scripture, and so he kind of recommended it, and it's about a 20-hour, which all the books that I listen to are, I've got some that are 35 or 40 hours long. And this one was about 20 hours, but it's about the influenza of 1918. And if you ever get a chance to read anything about it, the parallels between what happened then and what's going on now are just, I may talk about it sometime, I don't want to today, but the parallels between what happened then with the government, with the media, they didn't have the media like we have today, but of course, they did have newspapers, magazines, and press releases and things like that. But the parallels between what happened then and the things that are going on now are unbelievable, with the exception, and this is just my opinion, when you read about the historical events that took place in 1918 that surrounded the flu epidemic that happened then, what we're going through now is this is just my opinion. What we're going through now is not really an epidemic or a pandemic, even though it's a worldwide thing. But when you read about what happened in 1918, there were literally bodies everywhere. People were dying at such a fast rate that they couldn't bury them fast enough. People would walk down the street, and you may have home. They would tie. They call it a certain type of cloth. They would tie on their door handle if somebody was there that had it and somebody that had died. And in some families, you had every member of the family that died. And morgues, hospitals were completely overrun with dead bodies. It was just. When I listened to it, I'm thinking, and what we're going through, even though there's been a lot of people sick, a lot of people have died, I'm not trying to downplay what's going on now, but in the scope of what happened then, that was more like the Black Plague of the Dark Ages, and I really believe we're living in a great age of deception. And again, I'm not trying to downplay anything about people being sick. People are really sick. I'm not saying that. So I don't want people to take me wrong. But when you compare the two, there are some things that are really parallel, and there's some things that there's things going on behind the scenes. I've heard people say, Well, I don't really worry about the things that are going on behind the scene, because there's enough out in the open to drive a person crazy. There's enough deception and enough things that we can see. We don't have to look. I think it was Ben Shapiro. I listen to Ben Shapiro from time to time. And he said there's enough things done out in the open where people can see. We don't have to look for hidden things. And I believe that to a degree, but we're living in a great, great age. The Scripture, we can read all through what Paul wrote. We can read the things that he said. We're living in an age of deception. And so you've got to really weigh through what's true, what's not true, what to believe, what to not believe, where to put your trust, where not to put your trust. So it's a battle going on all the time. But I said that to say this. I know that we're going through for the last year and a half, we've been going through a difficult time as a nation, as a church, as a group, as Christians. We've been going through this is something that we've never faced before. But Satan can ride you down and can weigh you down with fear to the point to where, I don't know the exact numbers, but statistically speaking, they said that we've had in the last year and a half, we've had 5 times more suicides by teenagers than we've ever had before. Whatever that number is, I don't know. But, nationally, on a world scale, there's been more suicides. People are angry. So I was listening to somebody the other day, and they said, most of the time people's anger button is at about a 2. It takes a little bit for that anger, to get out. But they say now that people, they leave their house before they even face the traffic, before they get to a red light, or before somebody gives them a half a peace sign, or before anybody says anything or does anything. They leave their house at about an 8. And so, by the time they get in a situation at Walmart where you don't have any lines open, or if you're like me, every time I go to the bank, I look at which line I think is going to be the best. And I'll never get it right. I never get it right. But you face frustrating things, and life is full of frustration. But here's the thing about it. I text people, and people will text me and say, "Pray for me, I'm facing this." And a lot of times people are facing things that they may not talk about, and to another person may seem insignificant. But if it's something in your life that's challenging you and something that you're having to deal with, I've heard people say, I love Dave, but Dave is probably the most unsympathetic person that I've ever known in my life. And you just got to know Dave, you want to beat him up and hug him at the same time. But he's very unsympathetic, and not just with me and his mom, but with Nikki and with the girls. The girls get hurt, he'll laugh at them. That's just Dave, and I think he does that, to try to keep them from worrying. But my point is that people face things and they think, it ain't nothing. But it might be something to us. Donna has sent me prayer requests, and different people have sent me prayer requests, just like we talked about, our sister there, and to other people that might not seem like anything. But if it bothers us, then we need help with that. And God is able to help us. And so I'm glad that we serve a God that's not unsympathetic. I've had a struggle, honestly, this morning. I had a thought earlier in the week, and I kind of put it I just wrote it down, put it on the back burner, and then I had something else hit me, and so now I've got 2 messages. So I may just preach one and then preach the other. No, I'm just messing with you. But I was listening to the news, and I won't be too long with this, but I was listening to the news 3 or 4 days ago, or a couple days ago, I don't You guys remember what I said about my memory? It was either yesterday or last month, and now I find myself doing that all the time. But in Revelation 19, it talks about the kings of the east, and I was listening to the news, and it said that Saudi Arabia has made an agreement with China to supply China 15% of their annual crude or oil supply. Now that's a lot. That's a lot of oil. Scripture prophecy is being fulfilled. The Scripture talks about the kings of the east. I think it's in Revelation 16. Talks about just one single verse. It talks about the kings of the east preparing a way, waiting, and it talks about the Euphrates River drying up. So the kings of the east, and I was reading an article this morning about the sermon's not about China, by the way. This is just a side note. That how for thousands of years, China and Japan and these countries have been pretty silent, but now we're seeing. During World War II, we seen the Japanese. And I don't know if you watched this, but China, and I'm getting to something, China threatened to nuke, seriously, threatened to nuke Japan. They said, we're not playing games, and it was over Taiwan. And they threatened to drop nuclear bombs on Japan if Japan interfered with Taiwan. Taiwan is this little small island, and I've wondered, why is Taiwan so significant to the world, to these other countries? And so, when China said that, people were going crazy. But here's what I didn't know. Taiwan is this little small island where they produce almost exclusively components, electrical components for automobiles, motorcycles, etc., etc. So it's very important to the Chinese to make sure that they can have control over Taiwan. And so even though President, I don't even like to say this, Biden, started to say Obama, even though Biden said most of the time he's out there in La La Land, he did make a statement, I think 2 days ago. He said that if there was a invasion, like a cyber invasion of the United States, that we would have a kinetic war. And a kinetic war means a war with bullets. He made the threat that if we're attacked, which we already have been, if you've been watching the news, if we've been cyber attacked by another country, that there would be a physical bullet war. Listen, our world is being set up. And the reason I mentioned China and the Saudi Arabians is because what lies between Saudi Arabia and China? It's the nation of Israel. So we're getting set up for the battle of Armageddon, whether we realize it or not. And people can stick their head in the sand and act like these things aren't happening, but this is stuff that we've heard preached our whole life. And we're seeing it fulfilled. And so, living a Christian, I think it was Monday or